Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. I was gonna come into the show today like this so that you can
Well,
see my beautiful artwork behind me and my head's not in the way.
and not just your artwork. For those of you who are not joining us with the video component, Louise is sitting in her newly refurbished office in her home, where she made, and I'm going to brag on your behalf, she made that accent wall out of used
Fence.
fencing. She stained them. She did. She's my hero, because I would hire somebody to do that. This is where we're different. Before we get too far, there's a lot of ways where we're different. Before we get too far, welcome everyone to another episode of your Kick-Ass Career Weekly Wrap-Up. We are super glad that you are here live. And if you are not here live, we're super glad that you're here on the replay, wherever you are replaying from, because there are a multitude of ways to connect with us. I am going to do my best to rein in some of this energy. Just before we started, I was like, I'm fired up today. So if I feel a little bigger than life, I'm not going to apologize. That's just where I am. Please meet me where I am today.
I think it's fun to really kind of like grab onto something, right? And be fired up, be inspired towards something, all of the things.
That was the word I was looking for earlier. I got to make a note.
You're welcome.
All right. So Louise, while I'm making this note, tell me what you're celebrating.
Oh, I'm celebrating November. I don't know why. I will celebrate November, but here we are. It's always an interesting time, I think, these last 2 months of the year. It's you talk about this, Kim, in your newsletter and the stuff that you send out to your newsletter list, about like there's still time to do a lot of epic shit. And so really kind of like I don't want to say buckle down, but getting connected to that inspiration so that you can move the needle forward, instead of like just saying, oh, you know what, the year's just winding down. Right. We've got holidays, we've got all of this stuff here in Winnipeg. The weather's changed drastically. And so this season's right. And then we're like, arg, here we go. But really kind of leaning into that idea of like, where can I find that inspiration? And this week I've had those little, like, I call them like, those are those little bubblies that come up, right? Where you kind of get excited and you pay attention to what is bringing those bubbles to the top, so that you can be inspired and take that to the next level.
Oh, 100%. And thank you for the word inspiration. I came up with it this morning and it disappeared. So I appreciate that, because that was that word I was trying to find for most of the day. Although I did find a lot of inspiration. So it's funny that I didn't have a word for it. I just want to add in about this whole thing about the time, right? Because we very often, we'll either do the slow roll to the end of the year because it's like, oh, it's just too much, or we're going to be frenetic, crazy people. I may be frenetic right now because I have a lot of energy, because I'm excited. I'm on an emotional high. I've had a really great day of conversations followed by a week of really fun conversations. So I am on an emotional high right now, but it's not that frenetic. Oh my God, how am I going to get everything done? I can't do it, right? Which drives us all nuts. And then we don't enjoy what sometimes means being with more people. Right? Sometimes that is our joy. Like, we want to be with those people. Sometimes it's oh, I'd really rather not be with those people, but not feeling like we're in choice. And finding where we are in choice, finding the space and the time that does exist in all of our lives that we have been conditioned to think doesn't exist.
Right.
So, right. I feel like once we hit November 1st, it's all downhill. No matter which way. Like, I feel like a lot of people are showing up that way in the world. To me, I'm excited. I'm like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we have like 59 days left in the year as of today. And cool. What is 2023 going to bring? And oh, by the way, it's just a flip of a page.
Right.
As humans, we designed time. We designed calendars. We designed clocks as a way to mark the passage of these cycles that we all go through. And so we ascribe meaning to them. So why do we do that?
Right.
And how can we release some of that for ourselves? So my celebration is all of these fun conversations and having a lot of these conversations where it's getting into kind of a more existential or philosophical view of what we're doing in the world and how we're doing that, and why certain things have meaning and why other things we're able to not give that meaning to. um, and yeah, I'm excited about I'll be as excited in January. Well, January is our daughter's bat mitzvah, so I have a super big reason to be excited then. So we would love to know in the comments. Please share what you're celebrating so we can celebrate along with you. Michelle, over on LinkedIn, let Louise know congratulations. Well done on your accent wall. And my dear lovely husband, like always, is joining us. This time he's actually here 3 floors below me. I don't know how many. We have this weird split level thing, but he's down. His office is down there. So hi, honey, from the basement. Louise, do you remember what we're talking about this week?
Oh boy, do I, because I can't wait to talk about risk and right sizing your risk. This is something that comes up all the time in all kinds of ways and places and spaces. And I know, Kim, you and I wanted to bring this topic to the time together today because of all of the things I think that are going on kind of externally in the world. And how are we as business owners and entrepreneurs, as career changers and career development, right? Anyone who's looking to kind of take that next step in their career, we kind of, I feel anyways, that we're kind of like in this place now that we're just butting up against something that feels really big and really scary. And so today we're going to talk about like right sizing that risk and really kind of unpacking what that even means.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So I have a long history of dealing with risk. I was a crisis management consultant for a while. I did, which has you right in the throes of dealing with risk all the time. As an attorney, particularly as a business attorney and in estate planning, right? We deal with a lot of risk and like where are we okay with having risk as a business consultant and now as a business strategist? There's risk all over the place. There's risk when we open our eyes in the morning. And yet most of us, I mean, there are some people that it's like just that waking up can cause that feeling of, oh my gosh, what's the day going to bring? And most of us get up and go about our day. We may grumble about it and may be excited about it, whatever may happen, but we don't think about that risk as we're getting up and starting our day, as we're just kind of moving through it. When we look around us in the world today, as you said, there feels like there's so much more risk. And I'm really curious in this conversation, and again, encourage people to chime in the comments as well. Why is it that we suddenly panic when we see things happening in the world? Why does that all of a sudden make us feel unsafe, unsure, as though we need to make some big change, buckle down, pivot, right? Well, it's like something big has to happen so we can match what's happening in the world. I'm curious, Louise, like that energy. Are you aware of that energy from people?
Well, and I think it's a little bit of the opposite sometimes too, is that when we see risk all around us, then we were like, I don't want to risk anything. Like I hear that a lot too. It's to say like, I can't risk a career change right now because there are no jobs out there, or the market is downturning, our economy sucks, we're in some kind of looming recession or whatever you want to call it, fill in the blank. But things are going to be worse than they are today. And so I need to somehow mitigate that risk by changing how I'm showing up in the world or changing what I do. And so I think it really starts with that whole like definition of risk, really. Like when we are talking about risk, we're talking about like when you see something right out in the world and the perception is that the result is going to be worse, period. Right? Worse than it is today. There's going to be a bad outcome. That's risk. right? That's how we do it. And so now we need to evaluate what that outcome is, but we often don't even know how that even impacts us or what that even is, right? The world is going on and it's crazy, but what is the real impact that it's going to have on me today? And I think sometimes that why do we panic when the world, it feels really risky? And I think that just comes with that uncertainty factor. And when you're not comfortable with uncertainty, it can feel really, really big.
So, and it's funny because when you say those words, I'm like, but everything's uncertain. Like we are not guaranteed of anything other than right now and what's already passed. We
Sure.
literally have no idea what's coming next.
Right.
I have no idea if, something from the sky is going to come and fall on me right now.
Right. But
It's not. But we don't. We have no idea what's happening next. So like literally everything is uncertain. So where is it that we think at certain times that there is certainty that we get it, and where are those times where we're like, oh my God, I don't know what's happening? Like what's the change?
well, like I'm gonna ask you, what do you mean? Like, if there's uncertainty in everything, like you just
Mhm,
said, some things I'm more comfortable with than others. Is that where you're getting? Like,
mhm.
so I'm comfortable with the risk of a meteor. Oh, there was a meteor here in Winnipeg. I don't know if anyone saw it this morning, but is there a risk there around a meteor like striking, right, landing in my front yard? And I evaluate that risk, and it doesn't seem like it's risky because it doesn't seem like it's going to happen, so I don't worry about it. Like, is that what you're getting
Mhm.
at? Or yeah.
Yeah. So to me, that is the beginning stages of right sizing, right? Is understanding that everything comes with a risk. Because I feel like a lot of the people I talk with, and when I noticed myself being really risk averse, it was like I could put certain things into a bucket and say that's risky, right? That feels risky. Once I was able to put it in the bucket and say that felt risky, I could open that up and say, why is this risky? What am I afraid of actually happening? And being able to go through, right, those cognitive behavioral stages of truly unpacking the thoughts around why I think it's risky. Because as you said, very often the things that we think are these big deals, once we unpack it, we see that the impact on us is not likely to hit us the way that we're being told or conditioned that it will.
Yes. We actually, I don't know that we are actually risk averse because we actually do these little mini like risk evaluations every time we make a decision. And we make something like 65,000 decisions every day. And so we are actually reevaluating and evaluating risk all the time. And so, right? And yet, when we get into these really big, uncertain things, I think it just becomes like a balloon, and it expands really, really quickly. And we see it as really, really big. But right, like you said, is it really that big? What's the real impact? And it's like risk, right? At the beginning of the word risk, what's the real thing? Like, what's the real impact? What's the reality check that we really need to be doing on ourselves to say, like, is this going to impact me? Is this really the thing that I need to decide? And a decision not to move forward, right, still is a decision. A decision not to take on the risk is a decision. A decision to put off the decision is a decision.
Well, and I think it's right. You said decision, and that decision is autonomous. We get to make those decisions based
We
on
get to do
our
that.
right, but
Yep.
based on our experiences. And yet, my sense is that things feel risky when we hear other people making decisions that are enhancing the risky feeling. Like, I'm going to pull all my money out of the stock market, or I'm going to throw all my money in the stock market, or I'm going to sell my house, or I'm going to, it's like these giant decisions that are being made because some expert somewhere said boo. And it's like, oh, I have to follow what they say because this is really a risky time, instead of, in your own experience, trusting that you know what's right for you. I know when I feel like I can trust my own thoughts and decisions based on my experience, it feels far less risky because I trust myself not to let myself down.
Right. And I also believe that part of that trust is really about like understanding what you need, uh,
Mhm.
data,
Mhm.
what you need in order to make that decision, right? In order to figure out like, do you take on that risk? Is it okay or is it not okay? Like, where's the decision to be made? That's really what risk is, right? Where's the decision? And really investigating that, what that looks like for you, what is the information that you need to be able to incorporate that to make that decision. But again, you're making it from a place of like information, right? You have the knowledge, you know what you need, and that you trust that you have what you need to make that choice.
Well,
Yeah.
and for many of my clients and people in kind of my world, they're making decisions that are not only for themselves, right? When you own a business, when you run a business, and you're making a decision that you need to reduce hours or lay people off, or whatever those decisions are that impact other people's lives, those decisions do carry more weight. And so it's, even in my opinion, even more important that we're making informed decisions from our experience, not because we see the trends of people panicking and laying people off, right? It's like, yeah, you may have a couple of down quarters. That is the nature of business.
Right.
The only way you're guaranteed income in anything is if you are an employee and you have some contract that is non-negotiable, right? And even then things change. But in business, you're going to have the down times. And if this is a down time, how can you weather that? How can you make those decisions that are right for your company, for your organization? Because you can see what you need to do for your business. You're deciding that risk that you're willing to take. Again, going back to, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. Your business isn't guaranteed tomorrow. Your job isn't guaranteed to you tomorrow. And I don't mean that from a nihilistic viewpoint. I mean that from, great, then what works today? And Louise, I know you and I have been having that conversation in a different context this week, but is it working today?
Right. Um, yeah, when you can, I think, step back from that overwhelm, because that kicks in too, right?
Totally.
And as we, I'm just, as we mature in our lives, we start to look at things and process things differently. Like there's a lot of science that goes, brain science that goes in the right into like how we evaluate risk. We, like you said, our families, our responsibilities start to weigh differently than what they did when we were younger. What does that look like? But it's also about like how we actually process information in our brains, that sometimes we get stuck between like what we've always done and then what makes sense today. And so we often rely on, well, I have the label that I'm risk averse, or I've right, I haven't taken many risks in my life up until now, and then here I am. So that who am I to now start taking risks? And so sometimes that's also the part we need to wade through, and to put that aside to say, right, from today, let's evaluate and make a decision based on the facts of now and going forward, as opposed to, right, what I've always done, or what I've been labeled as, or what I should do.
Ooh,
We
nasty.
don't like the word should here.
Well, and so what I'm hearing so far is right sizing our risk, right? Having the ability to right size our risk. So far, we've identified, I think, two areas. One is, how do we actually define risk, right? We had talked about, are they those big things? How do we define it? What are we putting into that bucket? How do we then look at it, get the data points on it, and understand what is risk to us in our experience individually? Then also understanding from our own purview what our tolerances. And I know we haven't used that word yet, but like, just because you've been told that you're risk averse or that you partake in risky behavior, that's somebody else's opinion that has now become your narrative. But what is your actual tolerance, right? What feels right for you and what's working for you? So there's the definition of risk. And then I think, what is the measurement by which you feel you can allow risk, right? So I think those are the first two things that I'm hearing in terms of right sizing our risk.
Yeah, and it's not like when you talk about tolerance, it's not like we're like you pull out the actuarial tables and you right, like you figure that out and right and circle, and that's where you are, right? It's really about understanding like your right, how do you
Tolerance. Yeah.
feel from the head down? How do you feel about the risk?
Yeah.
And because you can be all up here in your head, and if you're not in alignment with what you really feel is right for you, then no decision you make is going to be in alignment. It's not going to be the right, I'm going to use right decision for you, because you haven't used all that information, you haven't used all the data to
Right.
make a decision, because you've ignored everything that happens from the neck down.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think of tolerance in this idea of, if you go to the gym, right? You have a certain level of exertion tolerance that you have. You can only work out so far, and then you've exhausted your body.
Yeah.
Right. It's, you know, if we think about ourselves or our children when we're studying, like our brains only have so much ability to bring in more information. How many hours can we sit on, you know, Zoom or streaming apparatus during a day? That's how much tolerance we have.
Right.
So no, it's not the actuarial. It's not the way we think of risk tolerance, generally speaking. But really this idea of how much can we tolerate?
Right.
How much?
Right. I'm not knocking insurance
No,
folks
all
out
good.
there, but yeah. So yeah. And then, after we kind of, the next piece that I see to kind of right sizing your risk is really comes from like where I come from, is how do we like solution forward? And so trying to find those options comes from that place of, if risk is around a negative outcome or a negative impact, how do we take that information using our optimism? I'm going to coin the word optionism that we heard from Malik a little while ago in our collective. But yeah, it really understanding like, so how do I solution forward? Now that I'm here at this place, I know what my tolerance is. I know what it's going to feel like in my body. Now we get to use that and look at all of the places and all of the spaces, all of the options, and not just the negative outcome, not just the pessimistic view. We're not going to ignore that. That's part of our data, but then we're going to look at all of it. So it's kind of like that. I see it as really like, how do we solution forward from this place?
Yeah. And in kind of boiled in with that optionism idea is there is no judgment, right? I'm going to go back to this idea of us giving meaning to time, us giving meaning to money, us giving meaning to risk, us giving meaning to whatever is happening in the world. By giving meaning to it, we're judging it, right? We're having, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but we're saying it's good or bad, right? It means something to us in terms of it's good or it's bad, instead of it just is, right? If we were to level the playing field and say we are in a recession, and it's just a fact, gas prices are going up, it's just a fact. There is historical levels of inflation around the world. It's just a fact. how can it, if it's just a fact, be different from skyrocketing out of control inflation, exorbitant gas, gas prices that are gouging the consumer, a recession that is going to take down companies. That was one that I saw today as a headline on LinkedIn. It was, this recession is going to take down an unprecedented number of companies. Well, that's all judgy. That just, if we just look at the facts, how we can then weigh our options.
Right.
Right, from a place of non-judgment.
Mhm.
We can say, oh, okay, things are getting more expensive. This is more challenging for us. Just a fact, it is more challenging to make ends meet. What needs to happen? How can we adjust? Or can we continue going? And when do we know we need to change things? And if we change them, what do we want to look at doing? So I love this as part of right sizing. So we have the definition. What is risk to you in your own definition? We have what is our individual tolerance, right? Understanding where our gauge is on that. And then we have this idea of solution forward. What are our options from a place of non-judgment? What's
Yes.
that next thing that we need?
I believe it's this keep reevaluating, right? And so we make a decision based on what we know today to be true. And there's all kinds of information that comes at us. And so filtering what it is that you need and reevaluating, right? And checking in. Like, this is how we build that trust within ourselves, the trust within the information that we're given. Like, we don't know, right? We don't know about the future. Nobody does, right? These predictions, these things, like you said, right? The title on LinkedIn that's going to bring down companies. What if it didn't, right? Or it brings down all of these companies and then twice as many rise again. Like, who knows what's going to happen? But as we move forward in our risk, in our evaluation, as we're right sizing it, it's about taking the information and reevaluating it. Is it still true? Right? Does it still make an impact to my decision? Because sometimes that changes too. And just because something is important today doesn't mean it's going to be important tomorrow to you. And so it's this idea of this reevaluation. I'm not talking about, we're not sitting here day after day analyzing our risk, right? And spending hours and hours of time. We're talking about when you feel like you're not moving forward, when you feel like there's this big, heavy thing in your way, when you hear yourself saying, I can't make a move, it feels too risky. When you actually use the word risky today in a conversation, somebody said it's risky business. And I'm like, that's a chance for us to take a look at what it means to have risk and to feel like you're a risk in a risky place.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, there is the actuarial way of looking at risk, which is you're constantly, right, working your tables, whether or not you're a true actuary or otherwise, you're working those tables, you're right, doing the measurements. When I think of this place of reevaluation, it's coming from a place of reflection, right? These are things that in our lives, in our businesses, in our careers, I believe I can speak for both of us, Louise, that we believe should be baked in. And there's a word should. I know, I heard it myself. You can bake in to your regular practices, right? Whether that is a nightly reflection or a weekly or a monthly or a quarterly, whatever works for you and to whatever scale, right? So a nightly reflection at the end of a day is just kind of, you can grade yourself and say, how did that feel on this risk scale? Did I feel like I stepped outside my comfort zone and I was okay? Because I really want to grow that tolerance a little bit more. On a quarterly basis, going in and saying, how am I doing with what I see happening in the world? Do I need to make any adjustments that would feel better? So these are these things that we would invite you to have baked into your regular practices. You can bring that risk reflection in as part of that conversation if this is something that you're facing. Is how do I deal with the feelings of uncertainty and a feeling like how do I deal with all the risk that's happening in the world right now? Because I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning of this episode. What we're hearing in the world right now is making us feel like there is more risk. There is no more risk today than there was 6 months ago, than there was mid 2020. They're different types of risks. It's different types of uncertainty, but there is no more than there was before. That's all I got to say about that.
I think a component too is, as we kind of go through this risk analysis, this risk mitigation, how to right size risk, and really leaning into what I want more of and how do I get more of that, right? Bringing more of that into my life, and what am I going to risk for it? There's this real component, I think, that we kind of bump over sometimes, and that's really the idea that this place of courage, right? It does take courage to do all of these things, and I think that's really important, right? It takes courage to look at risk a different way. It takes courage to make a big decision. It takes courage not to make a big decision. And so, like, I don't want to bump over that. Like, what we're talking about is it's not, it's simple, right? Like, I feel like where we've got to is simple doesn't mean it's easy. And so just taking a step back and saying, like, there's a real big courage component to this that takes some nurturing, I think, to really be able to build that self-trust with yourself, comes with a lot of courage around what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that I would put that under when you're identifying your tolerance, right? Is having that ability to understand where courage shows up for you and how it shows up for you, and how you can cultivate it and nurture it and nourish it as you're comfortable with it. My level of courage and tolerance is not the same as Louise's, and it's not the same as anybody else's. And it doesn't need to be. And you do need to define that for yourself and define where you want to grow, right? Because there may be people who are listening in who are like, ooh, I don't really want to become more courageous. That in and of itself feels scary. And that's okay, right? Just recognize where you are. So it's that, again, going back kind of what we talked about, it's the definition of risk for you. It's that definition of tolerance, which I would include courage in with that, right? Because it's really understanding yourself. It's the solution forward from a place of non-judgment and the reevaluation through reflection, so that we can get to that place and continue. And all of these elements, right? This is how we grow the ability to face risk in a way that feels more manageable and tolerable to us over time. So to me, that's how we right size our risk.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What are your golden nuggets, my friend?
Oh, golden nuggets. I have never appreciated more the power of reflection in my daily life, and just to hear it again, to say, right, like, again, here we are talking about risk and evaluating risk, and it comes up again, right? Mm-hmm. There's so much power in learning and reflection that I know, and I love hearing it again over and over, because that to me just reinforces that I get to do that in a pretty regular way. So yeah, I think that's my golden nugget. So thank you for bringing that up again, because I can't put enough, like, how much power comes from the pause, right? There is power in the pause when you're reflecting. So yeah, thank you. What about you? Your golden nugget?
I think throughout this conversation, and we both talked about it in a myriad of ways, is this idea really of autonomy and of self-directedness. This idea that we can step into this world that feels very uncertain and maybe unsafe, and yet actually decide for ourselves that that's not how we're going to respond to it. Doesn't mean that those things aren't happening, but autonomously, right? So in my self-directed nature, I can choose, I can be in that place of choice, in that place of optionism, and choose the option that
Mhm.
says it's just a fact.
Mhm.
I don't have to respond the way that I see others or that I think I have to, that
Mhm.
I should.
Yeah.
So I for me, that it was a major takeaway from our conversation today. We would love to hear everybody else's golden nuggets. So please drop them into the comments or send us an email afterwards. I'm going to put our email address up there again. Feel free to reach out to us. If you have questions, we would love to answer them. This conversation was yet another conversation starter that started with somebody reaching out to us and saying, what are your thoughts on? And so we decided to do a whole episode on it.
Mhm.
Next week, before I jump into next week, you can also continue conversations like this with us over at the Your Kick-Ass Career Collective, which is a collective of amazing entrepreneurs and professionals who are coming together to talk about how to do work that fits, work that looks different than we have experienced work looking and feeling before, right? It's an amazing group of humans that are over in the collective, and we'd love to include you if that feels right to you as well. So head over to yourkickasscareer.com to join us in the collective, or reach out if you're interested in talking to us about what that could mean.
Yeah, for sure. And please do send us your comments. I know not everybody here is listening live and able to share live. So drop us a line and let us know your thoughts. And we really do appreciate that. And we will bring those little nuggets to our time together here.
We will, for sure. And we are we're starting to build our calendar of having guests on. So if you're interested in being a guest as well, if you want to talk about things around the world of work and your career, please drop us a note and let us know you're interested, and we will reach out. Next week, we are going to, wait, I need to hide this so you can see it. Next week is Remembrance Day in Canada. I don't have my US calendar open, and I know it's a holiday there too.
Oh, is it? You
I think
forgot your
I
US
think
holiday?
Veterans Day. I've been in Canada for 15 months. I've lost track. I do know that, so we have that going on. Please join us on next Friday, November 11th. We are going to be talking about pausing and reflecting. And I know, Louise, that was a big part of what your takeaway was. It was also our first episode. We talked about the power of reflection. I think it's a great time to talk about that. We're in the throes of these last 2 months as well, and to give ourselves the permission to pause and reflect. Please join us live if you can. We would love to have you here. And otherwise, we will catch you on the replay.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you. See you later.
Take care. Bye for now.